Think about the absolute gold standard of certainty in our society.
Right, like the ultimate proof.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you are sitting on a jury, right? And a witness takes the stand.
Okay.
The lawyer asks them how they can possibly be so sure about what happened. And the witness just leans into the microphone and says, I saw it with my own eyes.
Case closed.
Totally case closed. It is the ultimate trump card. We are just biologically and culturally wired to believe that if something is visible, it's undeniably true.
We really do treat the visual field as the absolute ultimate arbiter of reality.
Yeah.
It feels so, completely binary. You either witnessed the event or you didn't.
Right. There's no in between.
Exactly. And if you did witness it, your account is treated as this solid, unassailable fact. It's entirely insulated from doubt.
And I feel that certainty every single day. I mean, we all do, you know.
Oh, for sure.
We like the world to be right there on the surface where we
Yeah.
can point to it, measure it, agree on it.
It's comfortable.
It is. But what if that exact feeling, that rock-solid, undeniable sensation of visual certainty, is actually the most dangerous cognitive glitch the human brain possesses?
That is the million-dollar question.
It really is. So today, we are taking a deep dive into the philosophy of sight.
It's going to be a heavy one.
Yeah, we have gathered some incredibly dense, interwoven research today. We're looking at texts like phenotype as misleading data and the first half of the failure of visual epistemology.
Plus the material on sorting systems.
Right, exactly. And visual epistemology is basically just a fancy way of talking about how we use our eyes to claim we know things.
How we justify our knowledge based on sight, yeah.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to uncover a pretty terrifying reality. We're going to break down how society takes a biological glitch in our eyeballs and turns it into massive, enduring architectures of inequality.
It really is a phenomenal journey to take because what we are actually doing here is decoding the mechanics of a grand illusion.
A masterclass in illusion, really.
Exactly. We're looking at how our eyes hand our minds a flat surface, how our minds instantly mistake that flat surface for the absolute holistic truth, and then how entire legal and social systems are built on top of that mistaken leap.
We have to evaluate the actual quality of the evidence our eyes are giving us, which, spoiler alert, isn't great.
Not great at all.
And the quality of that evidence is what I really want to tear into first. Because it's an error every single one of us makes constantly.
Nice.
I guarantee you, to the person listening right now, by the time we finish this deep dive, you will never look at a stranger walking down the street or a neighborhood you're driving through the exact same way again.
Or even a 10-second viral video.
Oh man, especially the viral videos. We'll definitely get to those. So let's start with why sight is so incredibly seductive to us. I mean, I imagine a lot of it comes down to the immediacy, right?
That's a huge part of it, yeah.
When I open my eyes, the world is just there. I don't have to translate it or calculate it.
But that immediacy is the trap. The research breaks down precisely what vision is mechanically capable of providing.
Like what the hardware actually does.
Right. Your eyes give you surface geometry. They give you scale, movement, contrast, and distance.
Just the physical parameters.
Exactly. If you think about it purely in terms of physical navigation, vision is an absolute masterpiece of biology.
Oh, for sure. If I need to know exactly where the edge of my coffee table is so I don't smash my shin into it, it's great.
Or calculating the trajectory of a car moving towards you at an intersection.
Yep.
Your visual hardware is completely indispensable for that.
So the hardware works perfectly for keeping us alive in a physical space.
Yes.
But, and this is where I see the breakdown happening in the research, sight completely fails when we try to use it to reveal hidden mechanisms.
It fails spectacularly.
To map this out clearly, the sources use this brilliant framework for part one of our deep dive. The 4 parameters of visual overconfidence.
Yes. Target, truth, totally, and title.
Right. Let's walk through those, because this is how the glitch operates in real time. So, first up is target.
Target is basically what your eye actually lands on, the raw surface.
Like the physical paint on a car or the fabric of a shirt.
Exactly. It's the literal optical input. But then, almost instantly, our brains jump to the second parameter, which is truth.
And truth here doesn't mean objective reality, right?
No, not at all.
Yep.
Truth, in this framework, is the assumption we make. We assume that the target, the surface, contains the essence or the hidden history of the thing.
Got it. We think the surface is telling us the whole story.
Right. And that leads directly to the third parameter, totally.
Which is that feeling of absolute, unshakable certainty.
Yes. Because you saw yourself, You feel totally confident in your assumption. There's no room for doubt.
Which is so dangerous. And then the final parameter is title.
Title is where the social damage happens. Once you have the target, assume the truth, and feel totally certain, you assign a title, a label.
Let's categorize it.
Exactly. You categorize the person or the situation based on a complete illusion.
That makes so much sense. Like the example in the text about the car crash. My eyes can give me the target, a crumpled blue sedan at an intersection.
Right, you see the smashed fender.
But my eyes cannot show me the causal history. They can't show me the faulty brake line that was installed 3 weeks ago, or the text message the driver was reading.
Or a sudden medical emergency.
Right, so I jump to the truth. I feel totally sure it was reckless driving, and I titled the driver as negligent.
And that is a perfect illustration of the friction between what the philosophy terms visual shareability versus visual sufficiency.
Shareability versus sufficiency. Let's break that down.
So these are the two gears of the visual illusion that we constantly confuse.
I want to make sure I fully grasp this. Shareability is just the synchronization, right?
Few match, yeah.
Like a crowd of people can stand on a street corner, point at that crumpled blue sedan, and uniformly agree that it is a blue sedan with a smashed fender.
Yes. Shareability means we can coordinate our attention around a visible object and achieve immediate consensus on its physical parameters.
We all agree on the target.
Exactly. But the danger is the social force that that consensus generates.
Because it feels like proof.
Right. When 50 people agree that a car is blue and smashed, they experience a profound psychological validation.
We mistake our collective agreement over an object's appearance for a collective grasp of the object's truth.
You feel like we understand the event just because we all see the same surface.
But then sufficiency steps in and ruins the party.
It really does.
Because sufficiency asks, does the flat, visible surface of that blue sedan actually contain enough empirical data to justify the massive conclusions we are about to draw?
About whose fault the accident was or what kind of person the driver is?
Yeah, and the answer is almost always a resounding no. The data is entirely insufficient.
Think about the phrase from the philosophical texts. It says, the eye opens the door, but the mind furnishes the room.
I love that quote. It's so vivid.
It's brilliant because the eye is incredibly stingy. It only hands you a tiny, fragmented pixel of reality.
A posture, a brand of clothing, a momentary facial expression.
Right. But the human mind abhors a vacuum. It simply cannot tolerate a lack of context.
We hate not knowing the whole story.
So the mind instantly hauls in truckloads of assumptions, historical narratives, and preconceived expectations to furnish that empty room.
Let's ground this in a real everyday scenario for you listening. Imagine you are walking down a city block. You see a man walking toward you in a meticulously tailored, clearly very expensive suit.
Okay, setting the scene.
He has a certain upright posture, a leather briefcase. Without a single conscious thought, your mind furnished the room.
Instantly.
You infer competence, you infer authority, you probably infer financial stability and reliability.
You assign a very positive title.
Right. But mechanically, optically, what did your eyes actually see?
Woven wool, dyed leather, and a specific arrangement of skeletal posture.
That's it.
That is the absolute entirety of the visual data.
Yeah.
The competence, the authority, the reliability, those are phantoms.
They're made up.
They are cultural scripts that your brain overlaid onto the wool and the leather.
And then, say you walk another block, and you see a brick wall covered in layered, chaotic graffiti tags.
The inference flips completely.
Instantly. The mind furnishes the room with concepts of civic decay, danger, lawlessness.
A failing school system, plummeting property values.
But again, the actual visual data is just aerosolized pigment resting on baked clay.
The graffiti example is so crucial because it highlights the absence of history. Vision is profoundly ahistorical.
It has no memory.
None. When you look at the graffiti, you don't see the zoning board meeting from 30 years ago that diverted municipal funding away from that specific zip code.
You don't see the redlining maps.
Exactly. You don't see the complex socioeconomic pressures operating invisibly beneath the surface of that street.
You just see the spray paint.
And you mistakenly conclude that the spray paint is the root cause of the neighborhood's condition.
Rather than a late-stage symptom of an invisible, decades-long structural arrangement. That makes me think of the viral video phenomenon.
Oh, the ultimate modern trap.
It really is the modern era's ultimate failure of visual sufficiency. You are scrolling on your phone and you watch a blurry 10-second clip of two people shouting at each other in a coffee shop.
We've all seen them.
You see the erratic movement, you see the red faces, you hear the volume. And because it's on video, it feels undeniably aggressively real.
It triggers that totally parameter.
Yeah.
You feel like a first-hand witness.
Yet you are witnessing an amputated fragment of time.
You are completely blind to the sequencing of events that preceded the recording.
You're missing the omitted actions occurring just outside the camera's frame.
You know absolutely nothing about the interpersonal history between those two individuals.
And still, the viewer feels entirely comfortable inferring an entire moral universe from those 10 seconds.
They decide who the hero is, who the villain is.
What the ultimate consequence should be, whether someone should lose their job, all based on a fragment of light hitting a screen.
There is a medical analogy in the research that perfectly encapsulates this gap between the surface and the truth.
I really like this one.
It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to a doctor with a visible, angry red rash on your arm,
Okay.
that rash is a true, observable fact. You and the doctor can share the visual experience of it. The target is real.
Shareability at work.
Right. But the rash itself is incredibly low-quality data regarding the actual crisis.
This could be anything.
Exactly. It could be an allergic reaction to laundry detergent. It could be a basic bacterial infection. Or it could be a manifestation of a severe systemic autoimmune disease.
The visible symptom is merely an alarm bell. It is not the fire itself.
Relying on the rash to tell you the entire story of the illness is literal malpractice.
And the inverse is equally true, which is honestly more terrifying. Oh, absolutely. A human body can look perfectly, visibly robust and healthy, while a catastrophic, highly complex illness is developing silently and invisibly within the tissue.
True illness often hides invisibly, while benign conditions often announce themselves loudly on the surface. But wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Yeah,
Let's play devil's advocate.
sure.
Let's look at this from a purely evolutionary standpoint.
Yep.
Isn't this rapid visual assumption-making a biological imperative?
In what sense?
Like, if I am hiking in the deep woods and I see a sudden flash of orange and black stripes in the brush,
The tiger?
right, I don't have the luxury of standing there pondering the causal history of the tiger.
No, you don't.
I don't need to interview the tiger to understand its complex motives. I need my brain to take that tiny visual fragment, the stripes, jump to a massive conclusion about mortal danger, and pump my legs full of adrenaline so I can run.
You are absolutely right. And the philosophical framework doesn't deny the survival utility of our visual hardware.
Okay, so it's not saying we shouldn't use our eyes to survive.
Yeah.
Not at all. The distinction lies in the domain of application.
The domain, meaning where we use it.
Yes. Using vision for immediate physical safety, processing the flash of orange to avoid being eaten, or stepping backward when you see a bus barreling through a red light, that is an entirely different cognitive function than using vision for moral, societal, or intellectual explanation.
So, relying on sight to dodge a physical threat is biologically sound.
Perfectly found.
But relying on sight to evaluate the moral character of a neighborhood or a person is where the glitch happens.
Exactly that. The fundamental error is not that we utilize our sight.
Right.
The catastrophic error is that we grant our sight sovereign status as a comprehensive explanation of reality.
We treat it like the Supreme Court of Truth.
We take a biological tool that was exclusively designed for immediate physical navigation, and we elevate it to act as a supreme tribunal for moral, historical, and social judgment.
We allow the visible surface to impersonate the totality of the truth.
Yes, and that brings us to the second part of this deep dive.
Which gets into some really fraught territory.
It does. Because if our eyes are constantly lying to us about physical environments and isolated events like cars and coffee shops,
What happens when we turn that same flawed visual hardware onto human bodies?
how do we misread people?
Right. This is where the research shifts from general visual overconfidence to the concept of phenotype.
From the paper Phenotype as misleading data.
Yes. And let's make sure we clearly define what phenotype means in this specific context before we go any further, because it's a loaded word.
It is. So in the context of this sociological and philosophical evaluation, phenotype refers strictly to the observable physical traits of a human body.
The stuff you can see.
Exactly. It encompasses the visible spectrum of human variation. Skin tone, hair texture, bone structure, the shape of the eyes, the markers of chronological age.
Even visible physical disabilities, right?
Yes, all of that. It is the raw physical topography of a person.
And the research makes a very careful, necessary distinction right at the beginning. It is not suggesting that phenotype is an optical illusion.
No, no.
It is not arguing that physical differences are somehow a myth and we are all just formless energy floating around.
Phenotype is real as a physical appearance.
Skin tone is a biological reality. Bone structure is measurable.
The breakdown occurs with what the texts call the interpretive and social overburdening of those physical traits.
The overburdening, that word is so precise.
It's surgically precise. The argument is that society takes a genuine, observable fragment, like a specific hair texture or a particular skin tone,
the raw visual data,
and systematically forces that fragment to perform dishonest, impossible labor.
We demand that these physical traits operate as predictive models for incredibly complex, invisible human qualities.
Exactly. And this is where the texts introduce this amazing decoding method.
Oh, the linear reality deduction.
Yes. Linear reality deduction, variables X, Y, and Z.
I love how mathematically they lay this out. Let's walk the listener through this formula.
Okay, so variable X represents the raw, observable visual input, the phenotype.
So X is the hair texture, the skin tone, the bone structure.
Right, the target, if we're using the earlier framework.
Got it. Then we have variable Y.
Variable Y is the vast, invisible contextual history of that human being.
Their lived experience, their struggles, their family background, all the stuff the eye cannot see. So Y is basically reality.
Yes, Y is the actual depth of the person. But here is the glitch. The eye cannot detect Y.
It skips Y entirely.
It skips Y entirely, and the mind jumps straight to variable Z.
And variable Z is the faulty conclusion.
Exactly. Z is the social and interpretive overburdening. It's the title we assign.
So we use variable X, the thin visual data, to completely bypass variable Y, the complex truth. And we land on variable Z, a stereotype or an assumption.
That is linear reality deduction in a nutshell. We look at a person's physical features, variable X.
And we ask those features to predict variable Z, the person's baseline intelligence.
We ask the features to predict their moral worth, their inherent level of criminality, their work ethic, or their capacity for leadership.
We are basically demanding that a few millimeters of biological variation act as a comprehensive 1,000-page biography of a human soul.
To illustrate the sheer absurdity of this, the research poses a rather brilliant thought experiment.
Contrasting visible versus invisible data, right?
Yes, imagine you are seated on a park bench.
Okay.
And a stranger sits down next to you. Over the course of an hour, they narrate the true complexity of their life.
They give you their variable Y.
Exactly. They detail a highly intricate, multi-generational family history involving migration and displacement.
Wow.
They explain how they have navigated wildly shifting socioeconomic class boundaries over the last decade. They reveal a daily struggle with chronic, invisible neuropathic pain.
Stuff you could never know just by looking.
They describe the cognitive dissonance of navigating 3 different languages in their daily life. And they outline a deeply inconsistent, frequently hostile relationship with state institutions and bureaucracies.
If someone downloaded all of that invisible data, all of that variable Y into my brain, my immediate reaction would be a profound sense of humility.
You'd have to be humble.
I would know without a doubt that it would take months, maybe years, of patient observation and interaction to even begin to genuinely understand who they are and how they operate in the world.
It's overwhelming complexity.
I wouldn't dare try to summarize them in a single sentence.
Precisely. But phenotype, variable X, strips away that humility.
Because it's so fast.
Yes. The visible surface seduces us into believing that we can entirely bypass the labor of patience.
Because the visual data of a person's face and body is delivered to our retinas at the speed of light.
And we mistake that speed of delivery for depth of knowledge.
We think fast means true.
Because the physical body is the container of the person, we mistakenly equate the wrapping of the container with the essence of the contents.
It's like, think about how digital files work. I was trying to map this onto something technological for myself.
I like this analogy.
Phenotype is treated like a high-resolution photograph, but in reality, it's just a low-resolution proxy.
A proxy, right.
It's like when you are browsing a streaming service on a really terrible internet connection, you see the thumbnail image of a movie.
And the thumbnail looks perfect.
The thumbnail is crystal clear. The graphic design is sharp. The title is legible. It feels like a complete piece of information.
So you click play.
Assuming you have the whole movie ready to go. But the actual data file behind the thumbnail hasn't downloaded at all.
It's just an empty shell.
It's completely empty. Phenotype feels incredibly rich and dense to our visual cortex, but as an informational data set regarding a human being's character, It is almost completely empty.
That is a stunning analogy, and it perfectly sets up the next layer of the problem, which is the emotional economy attached to these visual readings.
The emotional economy.
The text emphasized that when we misread phenotype, when we jump from X to Z, we aren't just making a sterile intellectual miscalculation.
We're not just getting a math problem wrong.
No, we are experiencing a visceral, affective reaction. People feel a gut instinct the moment they look at someone.
Oh, absolutely. You hear it constantly. Someone meets a stranger and says, I don't know, my gut just told me something was off about him.
Or, alternatively, I instantly felt like she was articulate, capable, and belonged here.
And they experience that feeling as a biological warning system or a natural intuition?
They treat the sensation as if it were an innocent, objective observation rising naturally from the situation.
Like their intuition is just picking up pure vibes.
But the philosophical reality is that the visual field is already deeply historical long before we ever arrive on the scene.
What do you mean by deeply historical?
It means you are never, ever looking at a human body in a vacuum.
Oh, I see.
By the time you casually glance at a stranger on the subway, your visual cortex has already been loaded with centuries of software.
So my brain is pre-programmed.
Heavily pre-programmed. You are perceiving that body through a heavy, invisible filter constructed from decades of media stereotyping, historical legal frameworks, inherited generational anxieties, and national myths.
So when I feel that gut instinct,
Yes.
I am not actually sensing the other person's true nature. I'm just feeling the reverberation of my own cultural programming bouncing off their physical body.
You are feeling the activation of a historical script.
That is wild.
And this brings us to the devastating interpersonal consequences of this dynamic.
Part 3 of our deep dive.
Exactly. How does this visual overtrust dictate the reality of one-on-one human interactions?
Because it's not just theory, it ruins lives.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The research frames this through the profound asymmetry between what it terms the unmarked body and the marked body.
The unmarked body versus the marked body. The way the text describes the privilege of the unmarked body is just so stark.
It's the privilege of invisibility in a way.
Yeah. The unmarked body is essentially granted the luxury of being perceived as the human default.
When they walk into a room, they are just a person.
Just a blank slate.
But the marked body, the body whose phenotype has been overloaded with all these historical scripts we just talked about,
Right.
that body becomes what the author refers to as a task.
A task. Consider the gravity of that word for a second.
It's exhausting just to hear it.
When an individual in a phenotype-coded body steps into the public sphere, they are not allowed to simply exist.
Because of the rampant visual overtrust of the society around them.
They enter a world that has already finalized its conclusions about them before they have even opened their mouths to speak.
It dictates every micro-interaction.
Every single one. They walk into a retail store.
And the security apparatus, both human and mechanical, watches them through a different mathematical calculation of risk.
They sit down in a corporate boardroom.
And their ideas are filtered through a fundamentally different, far more skeptical standard of professionalism and competence.
The tragedy extends to the very beginning of life, too.
The school data on this is heartbreaking.
The sociological data points out that a phenotype-coded child sitting in a kindergarten classroom is surveilled differently.
A literal 5-year-old.
They are disciplined for normative childhood behavior much sooner and much more harshly.
Because their physical appearance, variable X, triggers an adult's preloaded script, variable Z, of inherent unruliness or threat.
Based entirely on a visual reading.
Thinking about the psychological toll of that, it has to be a monumental exhaustion.
Imagine your entire life is a stage play. I kept thinking about it like this.
Okay, let's hear the play analogy.
You walk out from the wings, ready to perform your authentic self.
You're ready to just be you.
But you realize that before the curtain even went up, someone stood at the door and handed every single person in the audience a counterfeit script detailing your character.
The script you didn't write.
And the script claims you are the villain, or that you are inherently lazy, or that you are dangerously unpredictable.
And suddenly your performance is no longer about self-expression.
No, it can't be. It becomes a grueling, unending public relations campaign.
You have to manage their variable Z.
You have to expend a massive amount of your daily cognitive energy, not just being yourself, but actively strategically maneuvering to disprove the audience's counterfeit script.
You have to modulate your tone of voice so you don't sound aggressive.
You have to over-index on your resume so you don't seem unqualified.
You have to constantly labor against a visual reading that you had absolutely zero part in writing.
And the most insidious part of this entire interpersonal dynamic is what the observer experiences.
The person sitting in the audience.
The person holding that counterfeit script truly believes that their judgment of you is rising organically from your physical features.
They think it's just their intuition.
They completely forget that society handed them the script in the lobby.
The social instruction, the historical bias, utterly disappears into the act of raw perception.
The observer thinks they are simply seeing what is there.
The research uses a phrase for this that is honestly haunting.
Yeah, this one stuck with me.
It says the map hides inside the glance.
The map hides inside the glance.
It means that when we look at someone, we think we are taking a photograph of reality,
A completely objective photo.
when in fact we are just unrolling an old, politically constructed map that was slipped into our minds long before we ever met the person standing in front of us.
That is the perfect pivot point for us.
Moving from the personal to the structural.
Because it is tragic, deeply tragic, when one individual is operating off a broken map and making terrible judgments about the people around them.
Interpersonal harm is real.
But what happens when that broken map isn't just in someone's head?
What happens when we externalize it?
What happens when we take these mental glitches, these thin, misleading visual shortcuts, and we literally pour concrete over them?
This brings us to the texts on the architectural concept of sorting systems.
Part 4 of the deep dive. This is where the private illusion becomes public reality.
The research provides an incredible architectural history here. It shows how human beings organize themselves around perceived physical differences.
It meticulously traces the life cycle of a bad category.
And the foundational premise here is vital for you listening to grasp. A massive, oppressive system does not begin as a towering institution of steel and paperwork.
It doesn't start with a giant building.
No. It begins as a ghost in the mind.
Let's trace that evolution. Because seeing how a ghost in the mind becomes a physical building is fascinating. How does a bad category actually gain a foothold?
Well, in its absolute infancy, the category is just a perception,
Just a thought.
an attempt at convenience or a manifestation of fear. It is a primitive cognitive tool used to make an overwhelmingly complex world feel manageable.
The mind says, this group of people belongs over here, and that group belongs over there.
Exactly. And in this early, fragile stage, the category is purely theoretical.
It doesn't have any teeth yet.
It has no physical power. The people who believe in the category have to actively argue for it.
They have to do the work.
They have to write pamphlets, give speeches, try to convince their neighbors that this group is inherently suspect or our group is inherently superior.
It's an idea that requires constant manual labor to keep alive.
Right. But it doesn't stay in the realm of debate, does it?
No, because human beings are compulsive builders. We love to build.
We do not merely harbor our thoughts. We externalize them into the physical environment.
So the theoretical concept evolves into a social custom.
Just a habit of a town.
Then the custom hardens into a rigid, unwritten rule.
And then it crosses the decisive threshold.
The point of no return.
The unwritten rule is formalized into a legal document.
It becomes a municipal zoning ordinance.
It becomes a designated school track.
It becomes a militarized border checkpoint.
It becomes a standardized police risk assessment algorithm.
It becomes common sense.
The text contrasts a private bias with the systemic architecture in a way that just clicked perfectly for me.
Let's hear it.
If a person harbors a deep prejudice based on a visual shortcut, they might cross the street to avoid walking past someone they deem a threat.
Which is hurtful. It's an interpersonal injury.
It is. But a systemic architecture, a sorting system, doesn't cross the street.
What does it do?
It decides which streets are legally permitted to be paved in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The private prejudice can hurl an insult at you.
But the architectural sorting system possesses the power to deny you a line of credit,
Geographically isolate your housing options.
underfund your children's chemistry lab.
And systematically extract your time and health.
The mental glitch has been armed with bureaucratic authority.
Okay, but I have to stop you here. I need to challenge this.
Go for it.
Because I know there is a listener right now who is thinking the exact same thing I am.
What's the pushback?
If these categories, these vast social sorting mechanisms, are ultimately based on absolute fiction,
Which they are.
if they are built on thin, scientifically debunked visual proxies, why do they feel so incredibly, undeniably real to us?
Why do they feel like facts?
Why do we interact with these categories as if they're the natural laws of physics, like gravity?
That is perhaps the most crucial question of this entire deep dive. How does a fiction achieve the feeling of gravity?
Yeah.
The research answers this with a specific, deeply bureaucratic mechanism.
Okay.
It's called administrative repetition.
Administrative repetition. Let's break down how that actually functions in a normal person's life.
Think about the sheer volume of paperwork a citizen navigates over a lifetime.
It's endless.
You apply for a university, and the form demands you check a box, categorizing your physical identity.
Right.
You go to a bank for a mortgage application, and the financial software requires the loan officer to log that same visual category.
The municipal census tracks it.
The hospital intake forms require it.
The human resources portal demands it.
So because the category is repeated on thousands of official, serious-looking documents,
My brain starts to assume that the category must represent a deep scientific truth about human biology.
exactly, you mistake the system's relentless use of the category for objective proof that the category is valid.
The bureaucratic recording is mistaken for scientific discovery.
When a fiction is repeated across enough federal databases and municipal algorithms, it achieves what the author calls ontological confidence.
Ontological confidence,
Right.
meaning it feels real to our core.
It stops feeling like a fragile human invention and starts feeling like an immutable fact of nature.
Which creates an absolutely terrifying dynamic. Part 5 of our deep dive, the feedback loop of institutional illusion.
These sorting systems don't just passively sort people,
They are actively self-protecting.
and they generate the very evidence they need to justify their own existence.
This is the most insidious characteristic of a mature sorting system.
As the philosophy notes, institutions are incredibly adept at describing the present reality.
While completely refusing to confess the historical engineering that produced it, I really want to dig into the mechanics of this loop. How does an institution essentially launder its own history?
It operates in 4 distinct cyclical phases.
Okay, phase 1.
First, the architecture compresses a diverse population into a crude, visually based category, variable X.
Phase 2.
Second, it legally and economically constrains the people trapped within that category.
Perhaps by restricting their geographic movement or limiting their access to capital.
Right. Phase 3.
Third, the system passively observes the inevitable devastating outcomes of those constraints.
And Phase 4, the ultimate trick.
The system points to those devastated outcomes and claims they prove the category was biologically inferior all along.
Let's trace a hypothetical family through this loop to really see the gears turning.
Make it concrete.
Imagine a system decides, based entirely on the visual proxy of skin tone, that a certain group of people cannot legally secure a government-backed mortgage for 50 years.
Okay, so they are denied capital,
They are forced to live in a geographically isolated zone.
barred from accumulating generational equity,
The schools in that zone are funded by local property taxes.
which are artificially depressed because of the mortgage ban, so the education system crumbles.
The lack of capital leads to fewer businesses, fewer jobs, and increased desperation.
And then, 50 years later, a new generation of policymakers looks at that isolated zone.
They observe the high rates of poverty, the crumbling infrastructure, and the lower standardized test scores.
But instead of saying, look at the devastation our 50-year mortgage ban engineered,
The sorting system says, look at this poverty and failure. It must be a natural deficiency in the culture or biology of the people living there.
the false map injures the territory, and then the map maker points to the wound as evidence that the map was accurate.
It is a perfectly closed loop of manufactured reality.
It's sickening.
The policing example in the research highlights this perfectly too.
Let's hear that one.
If a municipality intentionally deprives a neighborhood of basic economic resources
Okay.
and simultaneously deploys a massively disproportionate police presence to surveil that deprivation,
Over-policing.
the inevitable mathematical result is a high volume of arrest records and documented instability.
Right.
The sorting system then imports those arrest records into a risk assessment algorithm to mathematically justify deploying even more police.
And withholding even more resources.
The mechanism feeds on the crisis it creates.
This leads to the part of the text that honestly gave me a cold sweat.
The part about malice.
Yes, it's the assertion that a mature sorting system doesn't require a single drop of malice to operate effectively.
It's hard to swallow.
I struggled with this at first because I want to blame bad people. I want to point at a villain twisting their mustache.
We want a bad guy.
You're telling me a system can relentlessly crush a specific demographic without a single hateful person operating the machinery?
It is deeply counterintuitive because we are culturally conditioned to view systemic harm through the lens of individual morality.
Right. If a bad thing happens, a bad person did it.
But consider the daily operations of the architecture we just described. In its mature late-stage phase, the system has already been built.
The concrete is dry.
The tracks have been laid. Therefore, the system only requires compliance, not hatred.
So the clerk sitting in the zoning office processing permits.
The clerk doesn't need to harbor any racial animus at all.
They simply follow the established municipal guidelines that dictate which neighborhoods are zoned for industrial waste facilities and which are zoned for parks.
Exactly. The teacher following a standard district-mandated tracking recommendation that funnels a phenotype-coded child away from advanced mathematics.
They don't need to be consciously prejudiced. They are just following administrative protocol.
The hiring manager utilizing an algorithmic sorting tool to find a cultural fit is just optimizing for corporate efficiency.
None of these individuals are operating with malice.
Yet through their polite bureaucratic compliance, they keep the massive architecture of distortion alive, humming, and lethal.
And because there is no overt screaming malice, the people operating the system look around and develop this morally dangerous realism.
That's a great term for it.
They look at the stark inequalities and they shrug, saying, well, that's just how things naturally are.
They confuse the current engineered arrangement with the natural order of the universe.
They assume that because the architecture has been standing for a century, it must be the baseline of reality.
And this creates a deeply hostile environment for anyone attempting to dismantle the illusion.
Right, the concept of disruption. The texts are so sharp on this dynamic.
When people trapped by the sorting system demand repair,
Or point out the historical zoning laws and mortgage bans.
the operators of the system view the demand as an aggressive disruption
They call efforts toward equity special treatment.
because the operators have mistaken the prior disruption, the original violent sorting system that damaged those lives over generations, for peace.
They experience their unearned advantage as a neutral baseline.
So any movement toward justice feels like an unprovoked attack on their tranquility.
The texts take everything we have unpacked today. The visual overconfidence, the category inflation, the administrative repetition, and the conversion of a physical surface into a moral verdict.
And apply them to decode the structural reality of racism.
The author presents a profound paradigm shift in how we are asked to understand this concept.
The foundational argument is that personal prejudice alone, or individual moral failing, is an entirely inadequate, vastly undersized frame for comprehending racism.
It's too small a box.
Way too small. Racism is not merely a failure of interpersonal kindness or a localized outbreak of irrationality.
It is the apex of everything we have discussed.
It is what materializes when a civilization's sorting system attaches deeply exaggerated false narratives to biological signs,
Constructs towering legal and economic institutions around those exaggerations,
treats the resulting engineered inequalities as objective biological evidence.
and then seamlessly transmits the entire arrangement to the next generation disguised as comic sense.
The research highlights what it terms a diagnostic contradiction. And it is genuinely staggering when you step back and view it from a civilizational scale.
Okay, a diagnostic contradiction.
Consider the dual realities of a technologically advanced society. On one hand, humanity possesses the collective intelligence and cooperative capability to build the James Webb Space Telescope.
We can see the birth of galaxies,
We can sequence the human genome down to the molecular level
automate global financial markets in microseconds.
and construct predictive models for planetary climate systems.
We have mastered the invisible laws of physics and biology. We are operating at the absolute pinnacle of scientific reason.
Yet simultaneously, that exact same society continues to aggressively organize its domestic reality, its wealth distribution, and its criminal justice systems around crude, scientifically incoherent 18th century fantasies regarding human worth.
Based entirely on the low-resolution proxy of visual categories, variable X.
It's an epistemological paradox.
How can we be so brilliant at reading the stars and so fundamentally superstitious when reading each other's faces?
The text argues that this reveals a civilizational-scale epistemic failure.
A failure of knowledge.
It proves that supreme intelligence in one domain, such as astrophysics or software engineering, offers zero guarantee of wisdom or accuracy in human interpretation.
A society can possess overwhelming, universally accepted scientific consensus that a specific visual category is biologically meaningless.
Yet that category will remain dominant and active.
And it remains active because of the architecture.
Exactly.
The scientific truth doesn't matter if the institutions continue to sort through the debunked category.
Precisely. A category can be entirely dead in a university biology lab, but it remains incredibly alive and lethal as administrative machinery.
It still dictates the algorithms in predictive policing.
It still defines the boundaries of school funding.
It still operates quietly in the code of medical diagnostic software.
So this brings us to the ultimate necessary question.
The big one.
If the problem is not merely a collection of individuals harboring bad thoughts, but rather these massive, self-replicating architectures built on bad visual data.
How do we actually dismantle it?
Right.
Because you cannot just think your way out of a reinforced concrete building. You can't just mandate that everyone read a book on empathy and expect the zoning laws to magically rewrite themselves.
The philosophy strongly affirms your exact point. There is a deeply challenging quote in the source material regarding this exact friction.
Let's hear the quote.
It states, "To reject a false category in theory while preserving its administrative usefulness is not liberation. It is hypocrisy with updated language."
Hypocrisy with updated language.
It's brutal.
That is a brutal assessment. It means that changing the terminology we use on a corporate diversity brochure
Or updating the polite vocabulary we use at dinner parties.
is fundamentally meaningless if the underlying bureaucratic form still physically sorts people into unequal life chances.
It is the illusion of progress, masking the persistence of the architecture. The text argues that the dismantling must be structurally focused,
You have to break the machine.
because the human mind might evolve faster than the institution. But if the institution's physical and economic machinery remains intact, it will eventually exhaust the mind.
And re-educate the population back into compliance.
The solution requires a relentless focus on how material consequences, wealth, safety, time, health are actively distributed by the system.
Rather than getting distracted by what the operators of the system claim to feel in their hearts.
Exactly.
Wow. Synthesizing this massive multi-layered journey we have been on today.
It's been a lot of ground covered.
We have traced the biological impulse of our eyes all the way up to the creation of structural inequality.
From the retina to the redlining map.
We have learned that what is fastest for our brains to access, the visual data, the surface of things, is almost never what is richest or truest to know.
It's just the thumbnail.
The goal the philosophical texts leave us with is not to somehow become physically blind, or to play a silly game of pretending we don't notice biological differences.
The imperative is to engage in what the author calls the labor of disciplining perception.
Disciplining perception.
To discipline your perception is to consciously, deliberately demote sight.
You have to fire it from its job.
It is the act of stripping vision of its sovereign status as the supreme explainer of reality.
Yeah.
You must force your visual input to act merely as first contact,
Just the introduction.
acknowledging that it is a highly flawed preliminary draft of information rather than the final, unassailable judge and jury.
So for you listening right now, how do you actually operationalize that in your daily life? How do you fight back against a glitch that is baked into your own retinas?
The practical mandate from the research is to cultivate a habit of severe internal
You
interrogation.
have to question yourself constantly.
Whenever something looks obvious to you, whenever you look at a scene, a person, or a neighborhood and feel that intoxicating rush of immediate absolute certainty,
That total parameter.
you must violently interrupt that feeling. Force yourself to ask, what exact literal data is my eye providing in this millisecond? Variable X.
And what massive historical narratives is my mind frantically importing to furnish the room?
It's about demanding the hidden causal history. Variable Y. You have to look at the visible arrangement and ask what decades of invisible mechanisms, what missing contests produced the exact surface I am currently staring at.
It demands that you slow down.
It forces you to become infinitely more thoughtful
More hesitant.
and fundamentally less susceptible to the oldest, most comforting lie our biology tells us.
The delusion that just because we can clearly see the surface of a thing, we have grasped the truth of it. That hesitation is where the actual truth lives. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, lingering thought to mull over as you step back into a world that is constantly screaming visual data at you.
A provocative thought for the road.
We've talked extensively about how our human brains are compromised by these historical scripts and flawed visual shortcuts. But what happens as we move into the future?
because the technology is accelerating.
Right now, we are training vast, incredibly powerful artificial intelligence networks and predictive algorithms using our society's accumulated visual data and historical records.
We're feeding them our archives.
If our own visual epistemology is this fundamentally broken, if we have spent centuries mistaking the map for the territory, are we simply teaching our machines to read our broken maps at light speed?
It's a terrifying prospect.
Are we hard-coding our most dangerous cognitive glitches into the foundation of the next era of human infrastructure? It's something to think about the next time a machine tells you it knows exactly what it's looking at.